All right. Good afternoon and welcome to the Mindfulness Cafe by the Academy of Creative Coaching. We are super excited to be here today with one of our coaches, Dr. Melissa Hankins. Welcome, Dr. Hankins. Thank you for being with us here this afternoon.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited about this topic.
I am too. I mean, just our little bit of interaction, I'm like learning so much and I'm just fascinated by it. And if you haven't seen on our social media, we are talking today about trauma informed coaching and really understanding what is it and how, if you're a coach, how maybe you can improve your skills in trauma informed coaching, or we will also be offering a CCE around this if you want more certification, more help with this type of coaching. And if you're not a coach, like I'm a coach, but I do marketing BD coaching, but I just learned so much about trauma just talking about with Dr. Hankins and just thinking about my own life and my family and all these things. And it was just that little bit of conversation was just so enlightening. So I'm so excited about this topic today. So let's go ahead and just dive right in and talk about what is trauma informed coaching.
Yes, thanks so much, Lee. And I just have to say, I love how you mentioned that you, in your own experience, you were looking at your own life and from our conversations. And that is a really beautiful segue that trauma impacts all of us in one way or another. And trauma informed coaching, it's really important for us to be able to be aware of that as coaches because all of our clients and even ourselves have either directly or indirectly through friends, through family, experienced some type of trauma. And I use trauma in a kind of a broader sense. So trauma informed coaching is really through the coaching lens, being aware that the person in front of you has had experiences that have impacted them in terms of their nervous system regulation, their emotional overwhelm. These types of things are really what can dysregulate our nervous system. So when we think about trauma, um, a lot of people tend to think of the big T traumas, if you will, the kind of abuse, the being in war, the being, these types of truly life-threatening things. However, trauma can be can be many traumas and stackable mini traumas that
Right.
happen throughout anyone's lifetime. And that can be anything from when we were a child and we were in a classroom and a teacher called on us and we got the wrong answer and all the other kids laughed or the teacher made uh, really called us out on it, right?
Right.
And then at that point, we might have developed this fear that may have been the very start of a fear of public speaking.
Mhm.
So, how does that then impact the clients we're seeing as coaches? We are now looking at our clients who are having difficulty getting up and leading a meeting,
Right.
right?
Right.
So they don't know what to say. They get overwhelmed. They procrastinate. They put it off. All of this. They're like, I can't lead this meeting, or I can't speak up in a meeting,
Right.
if someone else is leading it. So when we're looking at trauma, we want to look at, there's been a traumatic experience, which is an event in which our fight, flight, freeze, kind of fawn response, our stress response gets activated, a primary event. And then the memory of that event then gets stored in a
Yeah.
heightened kind of negative emotional intensity. Okay, that goes along with it. So that gets stored in a specific part of our brain, our hippocampus and amygdala, our limbic system. And then what we might see later for our clients, which can be years later, it can be months later, it can be days later, depending on when the event occurred, we are seeing this reactivation of a past unresolved traumatic experience.
Mm,
So trauma informed coaching is really being aware that our clients are going to show up with unresolved traumatic experiences that can manifest in an array of ways. It may be that we see them, as I was saying, it having difficulty leading a meeting or speaking up in a meeting at work. It
right.
may be that they are having difficulty with interactions with a colleague,
Yeah.
because perhaps there's something about that colleague that reminds them on a subconscious level. This isn't even conscious.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it might even remind them of an experience or a person that from their past that was creating that was involved in the traumatic experience, maybe created the trauma for them or was involved somehow, some way.
Right. So much to unpack. I'm trying to like not spit it all out at one time. So, first of all, I love the examples that you used because I think it's a good reminder that trauma is not always watching someone get killed in front of you or being in a terrible car accident. Like there are traumas that
Mhm.
happen to us
Yes.
that the person next to us might not have seen as trauma, but it was trauma for us for whatever reason.
Yes. Yes.
And then the flip side of that, I love the example that you gave even with the public speaking and, something happening in your childhood because an employer could look at someone and think this person's not trying hard enough, they're not equipped to lead,
Hmm.
they're this, and it's really a trauma thing that this person is
Yes.
experiencing, and just reminding ourselves, like, to see each other through different lenses because we really don't know who is experiencing trauma, and
Right.
unresolved trauma, and
Right. Right. Exactly.
really, really powerful. Yeah.
Yes, it's an experience that really, at whatever point, overwhelms us. It's like too much too soon,
Mm,
right? And so when our bodies experience an event that we feel we don't have an out, okay, so we feel trapped. We feel that it's we don't have the resources to
right,
deal with it, and that's why something that might happen, even that uh, example I gave. There's another example that I sometimes give that's easier. When you have, say, a 2-year old uh, child, or 18-month-old child who accidentally traps themselves in the closet,
mhm,
they can't necessarily open the closet. They don't know how to turn the doorknob. They're in the dark. They're traumatized. You put an adult in the same situation, they're like, oh, I just open the door.
right,
Right. So the resources of the adult at that point are, they have experience, they know these things already. The 2-year old is not resourced, doesn't have that experience, that knowledge in their toolbox. So trauma involves, not feeling resourced, not being resourced at the time that the trauma happened.
wow,
And so you're not resourced, you don't have a way out, and you don't know if it's actually going to be life threatening on some level.
right,
You may feel, that child in the classroom may feel like, oh my gosh, my life is over because I'm never going to have friends and I'm not going to be loved, and all of these things,
right,
all of the things that maybe we as adults might find silly.
right.
That child doesn't experience it that way.
That is okay, so that's fascinating. So that also, and I love the phrase "too much too soon."
Yeah.
Um, and I immediately thought about the past couple of years,
Yes.
the trauma of
Yes.
pandemic and watching. uh, the race issues we've experienced in our country, and watching a president that, you know, may not support what you believe or where you are in life, and all of this playing out. And I
Yeah,
just remember standing there on television watching what was happening at the White House on January 6th. And I remember just falling to my knees and just crying, because it was like, I'm getting teared up now thinking about it. It felt like I suddenly felt very unsafe, and just it
exactly.
was too much. It was too much.
Yeah.
And anyway, so I think about like all of that. So what have you seen in your line of work with trauma, um, through the pandemic, through everything we've been through? How has this impacted our society?
Well, absolutely. And so we've all been traumatized with this pandemic, whether it's losing loved ones, being ill ourselves and thinking that, oh my gosh, am I going to survive this COVID? I have COVID. I don't know if I'm going to survive. Especially in the early months of this, nobody knew what was going on, you
Right.
know. And as a physician, I coach physicians. That's my primary niche. And
So they were
so
really experiencing a lot, I'm sure.
yes, yes. I mean, they would, as much as they were taking care of patients, it was new to them too. So I had so many clients who would be so afraid to actually come home to their families that they would set up centers actually in their garages where they would strip down. As soon as they came home, they would strip down, don't speak to me. They would go straight into the shower and do hot showers just to get clean. Or some of them actually would be living, if they had, different sheds or something. People actually set up, shop and lived in those kind of, outside of the home because they were so afraid.
Yeah.
And so the uncertainty. So this comes up with the uncertainty. We didn't know when it was going to end. I mean, we're still, are we out of
Yeah.
it? Kind of,
Right.
sort of, I mean, but
Yeah.
but so much of the unknown. So there was so much unknown. We didn't know if we were going to survive it, both individually and collectively.
Yeah.
And so we were trapped in our homes, all of
Yes.
these things that we would normally do to relieve our stress, maybe go out and exercise, go to the gym, things like that, go for a walk. Even people were afraid to do that.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So the things that would normally allow us to, if you will, discharge a trauma arc. So when a trauma happens, and being able to release all of the intensity around it, the physical intensity, the emotional intensity, the mental intensity. If that arc is discharged, then people generally don't hold on to a trauma. But if they feel like, I have no way of letting this go, I have
Wow.
no outlet for it,
Yes.
then it becomes more internalized and
Yes.
can propagate into the future.
Yes.
So,
That's
yeah.
interesting, that outlet. And because we're probably, you know, depending on your personality, your disposition, you're experiencing trauma, some more than others. And if you're not living a life where you have outlets and have support, so, and not waiting until something big happens in your life, but like setting
Mhm.
your life up so that you're regularly, I know we use the word self-care a lot and it's kind of been a trending word, but really finding ways to take care of yourself. Um, and not
Right.
saying that therapy isn't needed or coaches aren't needed, but at least getting ahead of letting some of that out, whatever we may be experiencing.
Right. And as much as people will benefit may benefit from coaching and or therapy,
Mm.
uh, that doesn't abdicate or take away the responsibility to self and
Yes.
the responsibility for self.
Yes. I love
Right.
that. Responsibility. Yeah.
And so the things that we need to do or can do to help take care of ourselves are important. And the another thing I just want to touch on in terms of the trauma related to the pandemic, people were losing their jobs, right?
Yeah.
So then it's not just safety from a standpoint of actual illness, physical illness, but it's safety and security in terms of your financial station. You now are you able to keep your home? Are you able to find another job? How are you navigating this? And so as coaches, working with so many people who may have been in this trauma of, I don't even know if I'm going to have a job tomorrow.
Right. Yes. Yes.
So these things that were really unprecedented, at least in our times, right? That our clients might be coming to us for, and at the same time, we ourselves are traumatized.
Yes. Yes.
And
It was a very it is and it is and was a very difficult time because undoubtedly people are still experiencing or dealing with some of the trauma from the past few years and maybe not even realizing that's what it stemmed from.
Exactly. And then we have layered on top of the actual COVID trauma, we have, all of the racial unrest that was
Yes.
going on.
Yes.
So then it's at that point, our threshold was already so low for anything to then come.
Yeah.
And if we saw something, it would impact us even on a deeper level. And so sometimes what we might see is that, okay, we can't do anything against this virus. We don't know how to do anything about this virus, but we now have a target of people. We can do something against people, do something, meaning, violence and things like, I mean, this is sometimes how people might feel when they feel so trapped, when people feel so scared, when people feel so alone.
Yeah.
They
Yes.
might revert to behaviors that are in that moment really not helpful. But the behaviors that we might utilize when we are in a calm, peaceful, fully resourced state of mind and being,
Right.
and we can access our cognitive thinking, so our kind of our ability to make decisions, to use creative problem solving, to
Mhm.
even have compassion.
Mhm.
Those things really what require us to be in a calmer state of
Yeah.
being. But when we are so um, activated, or when our nervous system is so activated, when our fear state, our fight, flight, freeze response is so activated, and we don't know where the next threat is coming from, at that
Right.
point, had so many threats coming at us, it was all about survival. And
Yes.
when that happens, our cognitive abilities go offline, and our
Yes.
more primitive kind of um, uh, survival instincts will kick in,
Mm.
and they aren't necessarily, we see threats where there aren't threats.
Mm. Wow.
And so, because everything becomes a threat, and so then we bring it back to, say, a work situation. So we're being incubated in this environment of, like, where's the next threat coming from, you
Right.
know um to my physical self, to my financial security, all of this. And then we have an interaction with someone at work, and they say something right, they say just the
Right.
wrong or in the wrong tone, and then it becomes this major case, right? We
Right.
then,
Right.
because we're not reacting to the person in front of us,
Yeah.
we're bringing in all of this other. And so as coaches, being aware that sometimes uh, what our client is bringing to us to work on may not be about what they are seeing in front of them. It might, they're bringing in all of this other stuff.
Right.
and
Right.
helping the client to recognize that.
Yeah.
And when you can develop that awareness, it makes it easier to take a step back. I'm not saying it makes it easy, but it might
Right.
make it easier to take
Right.
a step back and say, oh, wait, okay, this is not, this, I overreacted, or I can now see this through a lens of empathy,
Yes.
for my coworker, because I realized I was being in all this other stuff. But
Right.
sometimes we need an objective third party, like a coach, or a therapist, to help us to make that distinction, because we're too deep in it.
Yes. Yes. So I want to talk about the therapy versus coaching in just a second, but I want to pick up on again the racial unrest. I keep hearing people talk about. There's this new quote. I don't know if it's new. I'm just hearing about it past couple of
Mhm.
months, where they talk about we look at things that African Americans may do and call it culture, but really it's trauma. And
Mm.
labeling it culture, like, that's just our culture, how we do things or how we react to things or how whatever, um, but really it's a great number have maybe been living in trauma, and they think it's normal, or we think it's normal to, like, react a certain way or live a certain way or be suspicious of people or
Mhm.
whatever the situation is, but, um, how just being careful of thinking a behavior is normal
Mhm.
when it's that just because our parents may our mothers may have, you know, raised 10 kids and kept a perfect house and still pleased her husband I mean, that doesn't mean she was not living in trauma, and that we should be doing the same thing. So just
Right.
understanding, like, what's normal and what is stuff that we've just gotten used to, but it's really trauma. So
Right.
really
And
what we
so, wow, okay, there are a few points with that. One, I want to just comment on, this idea that, okay, that's just being Black, versus recognizing that that's trauma. Um, that to me is another way of creating, it's othering, like otherness. It's them versus us kind of,
say.
mindset. And because at the basis, we're all human beings, right? And that we have traumatic experiences, but in different ways. And there are absolutely traumas that are unique to the Black population and to Indigenous peoples and to other, and other ethnic minorities. And so there are absolutely, uh, traumas that are unique to certain populations. And to dismiss that, is a way of creating this us versus them dynamic.
Mhm.
This,
Right,
that it's easier to dismiss the humanity of a population
right.
when you don't recognize the trauma of the population.
Yes, yes,
Right.
yes,
So I
yes.
want to just kind of make that point. And then in terms of this, understanding that trauma can happen, there's generational trauma. And there are studies around, a branch of science called epigenetics. And so this is looking at the genes and in the chromosomes that are passed on generation to generation to generation, and they are influenced by the environment. And certain genes can be turned on or turned off given our environment. And so if our grandmother, for example, was in a traumatic situation, maybe, grew up in poverty, or struggled, or was abused, or there were things that were going on, then her and she got pregnant, and was carrying, say, our mother, then that environment is going to impact the genes and
Mm,
the development of the mother, which then that is going to be expressed, and it might be expressed in different ways of anxiety or depression
right,
or different ways of kind of understanding. So there's a genetic component that can be possible, that can be switched on and off. And we know, as at least blacks in America, we have generations upon
right.
generations of
Yes,
trauma, right?
yes,
And so there's that aspect. And but the interesting thing is, we can also, if we change our mindset,
mhm.
change in our environmental cues, we can actually shut off some of those genes and turn on other genes
Oh,
that can be helpful.
yes,
So I say that because I don't want people to say, "Oh, well, it's just generational. I'm just have to live with it."
yes,
It's not that. It's being aware that you might have some of that legacy,
yes,
and you can be the generation to change it,
right.
right?
So, I've heard you use that word several times, just the awareness piece.
Yes.
That sounds like that's a huge part of getting people just to be aware of what's happening.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Because when we are aware, um, we have the ability to then change. You can't change what you're not aware of within yourself, right? Because you might just be in the cycle of, I don't know why I have this pattern. So we'll have a client who for example, I can think of, some of I have a few physician clients who have had trouble with charting, like getting their charts closed, so documentation kind of things. And this could be in the corporate environment, where someone might have difficulty following through on projects or getting those types of things done, right? And they
Right.
procrastinate, and they're not sure why they're procrastinating. But I keep doing things, and I know I should get this done. I know I have my timeline. I have all of these things. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna get this part done on this day during this hour, but I'm still not doing it.
Right.
So I don't understand what the problem is. And
Yeah.
so they're sitting before you, and you're their coach, and and when you've worked with them to maybe implement uh, strategies, and it's still not changing, that might be an indication that there's something deeper that they're not aware of, that is
Yes.
holding them in that pattern. So I often say, when people are caught in behavior patterns that they can't seem to shift, by taking certain actions, they don't follow through on actions they say they're going to do, these types of things, then that might be an indication that there's some sort of trauma underneath. And I
Yeah.
use trauma once again in the broader sense. It could be something smaller,
Right.
but it could be with the procrastination piece. Okay, well, I have to get it perfect. And I've had a few, actually more than a few of my physician clients who are saying, well, when we dig a little deeper, oh, I did have that malpractice case come up against me, and I was, absolved of any, it was fine and all that, but it was so traumatic to go through that and have my career, like,
Yeah.
maybe
Yeah.
good, and all of those things. So now I make sure my notes are perfect, and I put in so much, and
Mhm.
they fall behind.
Mhm.
So it's this idea that I have to be perfect, but they had this trauma of, like, I don't know if I can practice medicine anymore because
Right.
my livelihood is being threatened.
Yeah.
So there's safety and security. And so these things, and they never made the connection.
Yes. Aware. They're not
Yes.
aware. Yes. 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 Um, so a couple more topics before we end. I know we're going a little bit longer than normal, but the coaching versus therapy. how do you
Yeah.
know if you've experienced trauma, like which one to go to or what to get?
Right. So, because that's really important. It's, some coaches who might have some background in behavioral health or science, like my background is as a physician and specifically as a psychiatrist. So, my threshold might be a little different than someone else as a coach, but still, I'm not doing therapy with my coaching clients. Right. And so when we are really looking at coaching and trauma within coaching or the impacts of that, we might look at, okay, you're stuck in this current pattern. So you're in the present. We're based in the present with coaching as opposed to in the past. But
Mm,
sometimes we need to look at the past briefly to inform the present.
right.
Right, so as a coach and as a therapist, you might be doing more of the unpacking of the past,
Yes. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so when you have a client who's coming in as a coach, when you have a client who's coming in before you and they are stuck in a behavior pattern and they're not being able to make a change, they're having maybe a lot of interpersonal difficulties with a colleague, maybe there's a lot of conflict management kind of work that you're trying to do with this client, and they can't seem to shift out of this pattern. I don't know what it is, coach, but this person just rubs me the wrong way
Mhm.
every single time I see them, and they could be saying hi and I could bite their head off, kind of thing. And so that's an indication that they're not reacting to the person in front of them. They're
Mm.
reacting to something in the past. And if they can't seem to, and you can do some gentle questioning with them around, does this person kind of remind you of someone in your life,
Yeah.
so kind of get at it a little bit. And were the interactions you had with that person, yes, okay, yeah, that person reminds me of my Uncle Joe. All right, so Uncle Joe, what kind of interactions did you have with Uncle Joe? Well, he was horrible and da 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 and whatever, blah 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 blah. And but even just helping a client sometimes step back and say, "Oh, wow. Okay. What?"
Yeah.
Okay. So Ron there is not Uncle Joe, and so sometimes that can be enough to create a shift.
Yes.
Right,
Yes.
right. But if they're continuing to be stuck and they are jeopardizing their position at work because they are being told, well, you have an anger problem or these types of things, then that might be an indication that, it might be a good idea for you to maybe unpack this a bit with a therapist. Have you thought about doing that?
Right. Yeah. So that's really helpful. That's good. And so the other topic, it might be the last. I might have one more. I really wanted to touch on is the safety piece. We have a lot of people who are following us and watching us that are currently coaches,
Hmm.
and I know that safety is a very paramount when it comes to coaching, especially
Yeah.
in a trauma informed. How can we, and this may be knowledge that they already know, but just ensuring that we're creating safety in our coaching?
Right. So with safety, part of this is really being present with yourself and present with your client.
Mm,
So recognizing, looking at the expressions on their face. Do they seem to are they seeming to look off? And it can be a little difficult sometimes with Zoom,
right.
or, virtually, but it's still certainly possible. Listen to the tone of their voice.
Hmm.
Has it shifted? What's and if someone seems distracted while they're talking about something that is painful for them, um, but they seem maybe not really with you. You might ask, where are you right now? Are you
Mm,
still here with me, or are you where are you right now?
mm,
Because they could be back in the traumatic situation and re-traumatizing themselves because they're there, their body is here with you, but their
mhm.
mind is being activated by this trauma, and their emotional state and their nervous system is being activated, and
Right.
so they're not being able to really do the work of coaching,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so, and some, depending on what level of trauma someone might be having or have experienced, they might find that their breathing is shifting, or they feel, or they're becoming emotionally dysregulated. Maybe they're really tearful and they can't stop it.
Yeah.
And so the goal at that point is to bring them back into the room with you, you
Wow.
know.
Yeah.
And so that can be something of, okay, I want you to take some deep breaths. I want you to look around the room, and you can engage the five senses, you know. So what do you see? Describe it in detail to me. Okay.
Yeah.
What are you hearing right now? Listen to the different sounds. Describe that to me.
Mm,
Feel, what are you feeling right now? Are you feeling your butt on the chair, your feet on the floor? You know, tell me the texture of the clothes. You know, rub your hands on your thighs. What's the texture that
yeah.
you're feeling? You
Yeah.
know, bringing them back into the present
Yes. Yes.
is really important. And for you, if you as a coach are feeling like activated or dysregulated with your emotions because maybe something your client is saying or doing is freaking you out, and
Mm,
you're like, oh, I can't. And
mm,
internally you're trying to keep it together externally, but internally you're like, ah, right.
right.
It's because we're human,
Right.
right?
Right.
So remembering to breathe, and as you're breathing, remind your client to breathe. So
Yeah.
the breathing can help you and your client, you know. So you're co-regulating each other basically
Yeah.
with the emotional state. And of course, I do something called tapping or emotional freedom techniques, and that is something that can also be really great in decreasing the stress response and bringing someone, basically sending a signal to your amygdala and hippocampus, your stress response centers, to stand down. It's actually safe here. You're okay.
Right. Right. I love it. I just had a flashback to when I did tapping for the first time, and a coach
Mm,
had taken me through that process, and we identified I didn't know what emotion I was having really, or there was something going, I couldn't figure it out. We figured out it was a safety. I felt unsafe.
mm,
Um, you know, and I think she kind of somehow led me to a time in your life when you felt very unsafe, and it just brought up all these emotions, and then it was a trauma that I didn't just thought, that kind of stuff happens in its life. Stuff happens in childhood.
right.
Um, but it was just fascinating. So I just really I know we're ending this, and I know there's coaches watching, there are just, all types of people watching, but I just think this is such a powerful segment because there are probably relationships that are ending or struggling, marriages, parent relationships, um, and it because there's trauma going on that's been unresolved,
Yeah.
and I just think it's just so important for, like, everyone to get themselves a trauma coach or something, but, just to
Right.
really identify, like, really think, like, I don't know. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Right. No, no, no need to apologize. I love this. But it's so true because we, and it, just because we acknowledge or recognize the trauma that we have had doesn't mean that we have to, steep ourselves in it
Mm,
and relive it.
Mhm.
and keep spinning in it. But the idea in bringing awareness to it, and I think this is the really probably the biggest piece of it, for ourselves as individuals, for coaches helping our clients. When we recognize it and bring awareness to it, it can open the door to self compassion, and when we can allow our and compassion and empathy for others
Yeah.
also,
Yes.
recognizing that they have likely have had trauma, because when we can step back and say, wow, okay, is this something that might be, I don't know this for certain, but is this something that might be related to a trauma for this person? It's not to, say, oh, poor person, that kind of thing. It's like, wow, okay, this is a human response. I
Yes.
can I can look at this through a different lens, and maybe I then don't have to become so reactive.
Yeah. Yeah.
So building in that space, that awareness of trauma is really about helping to develop compassion within our clients and ourselves, and within the relationships that they have with others.
Fascinating, fascinating. I was okay, I'll talk more offline. This is about to turn into a therapy session. Well, I have truly, truly, truly enjoyed this segment. I am going to promote this to so many people because I just think it's so critically important. And really also to our, again, current certified coaches who are looking for more support, more help, to grow their practices, grow their experiences. I think this is just fascinating. So thank you so much for taking time out.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
And I just, again, applaud you and wish you so much success on taking on a really hard, um, journey and purpose of coaching, physicians, because
Mm.
I think we take for granted, uh, just because they may get paid a lot of money, there's a price that comes with that, and,
Yeah,
um
yeah, it's very isolating. And just like, physicians are considered leaders within healthcare, just because of the title, and just like any kind of leadership position, it's very isolating. And on top of that, with physicians, it's a small segment of the population that has gone through I call it the trauma of physicianhood,
Mm,
because there really is a lot of trauma inherent in medical training
yeah,
that most people don't even aren't aware of if they haven't been through it.
right. Yeah, yep. So, thank you so much. Thank you, and thank you all for watching today. We see your comments and your likes, so thank you for supporting us. And if you have any questions, or you should be seeing more information about Dr. Hankins actually hosting a CCE for us in the upcoming months. And so, if you need more certification or looking for more help with your coaching, we will have that as a resource for you. So, thank you so much, and you all have an amazing day.
Have a great day.